Okay, so in this video, we'll cover query function and we'll do a few different examples here. The type of things we're going to cover in this video, the first thing is going to be how to run a query function on multiple tabs. The second thing we'll do import range function together with query function. And that's something when we have our data on one sheet and we have a completely different sheet and we would like to just grab the data from here and run a report out of that with our function. So that would be the second example. And then finally, we will also look at subqueries and see how that works. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do, just create a new tab here. And I'm going to call this master. So again, we have this first tab that has some data, and we have the second tab that has some data. And we're going to run some reports from this. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to run a simple query statement from this transactions tab. I'm going to go to my master tab. I'm going to start with my equals query function. Here we go. The first thing is our data. So I'm going to go to transactions tab. I cannot click in A1 cell, so I'm going to start from this corner. And I'll do Control Shift left and down to select my data. I'm going to press F4 for good practice to lock this range, comma. And the second thing is the actual statement we're going to write. So for right now, I'm just going to leave it blank, double quotes, and comma. And finally, the number of headers. In this particular case, we have just one row of headers. So I'll just do one, close our parentheses, hit enter. This should just replicate our data set. So at this point, what I'm going to do, I'm going to run a statement out of this. And my statement is going to be, let's just grab the column A and column C for state of Illinois, which is column H. So I'll go back here and do that. So I'm going to say select A, C, where H, which is our state, equals, and in single quotes, IL for Illinois. I'm going to hit enter. And this should just get me those first two columns, column A and column C, from transactions tab, which is date and region. And it's just going to be the data for just state of Illinois because that's what I filtered it to. Now, if you wanted to also see Illinois in these results, you would also make sure you include that column in your select statement. And again, if you don't know these basic things about query function, go back and watch previous videos and then come back to this. Now what I'm going to do, I want to now run all these results from Illinois, but I want them from both tabs, from this transactions tab and this previous transactions tab. So I need to just use those both data sets together. So to do that, I'm going to delete that and start over. So equals, we'll start with our function. So I have two tabs of data. So for that reason, I need to use an array. To use an array, I'm going to start with this curly bracket for my data. And now I need to select my first data set. So I'm going to go to my transactions tab. Again, I'm going to click in the corner, Control Shift left and down. That will select my data set. I'm going to press F4 to lock it. And then I need to provide now the second data set. So what I'm going to do after I did this first range of data right here, I'm going to do a semicolon, which will now allow me to select another range to combine together with this one. So I'm going to go to my transactions previous. Now in this one, I don't really need to select headers in that. So I'm just going to start from here, Control Shift left and down. Now keep in mind that you could technically just select your headers too. In this case, it would be fine. So it's not going to interfere because I'm filtering my data. And if I filter it to Illinois, the state is not going to be a problem there. So now go here, click, and I need to select my data set. I'll try to do Control Shift left and down, and you can see in Google Sheets, sometimes it has these weird things when it doesn't work with these keyboard shortcuts, and you're gonna have to kind of manually highlight your data, which I kind of hate a little bit, but it's fine. So usually what I would do, in this case, is because there's a lot of data, just select a little bit like this, and then go and make adjustments later on. So I'm gonna just select this much, then I'll figure out how much more I have left. At this point, I have the first tab, and I did my semicolon, and I did the second tab. If you have a third tab coming, just do another semicolon and go for your third one. I don't, I only have two, so I'm gonna close this curly bracket, which I've opened over here. So that's my data. Now, after the comma, I'm gonna do double quotes again. That's gonna be my statement. We already know what the statement is gonna be, so let's just go ahead and type it. So I'm gonna select, I'm gonna say, let's select all columns, select star, where, and I want to filter by the state, which is age, right? Where age equals to, and I'm gonna do Illinois in there. Okay, and quote again, so this single quotes are here, and this quote is closing this one over here. Here we go, comma, and number of headers. So the header is coming from this first range, and it was only one. So I'm gonna do one, and try to close this. And I'm gonna get this value error. So now what you can see is the error that I'm getting is that there is no column age. So what happens once you start using query function with not direct reference to a sheet like I was doing before? So before in here, we didn't have like an array of data. It was just a range from the other tab. You could just refer to age, or you could refer to, you know, this or that, right? Like the name of Google Sheets column, like D, E, F, and so on. But once you convert the data that you're sending to query function to an array, the whole thing changes. So now you cannot use age any longer. And the way you have to do now, instead of doing the column names like A, B, C, D, you're just calling those columns like column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. So if we look at our column age, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's column 8. So what I have to do, I have to go back, and here I have to say where column 8, and you have to make sure, by the way, you do capital C, otherwise it doesn't work, equals Illinois. I'm gonna hit enter now, and now you see it works. Because it's an array, you have to do the column. And now we get all of it combined from both. Now I have to do a little adjustment, because if you remember when I did the selection from H2 through H9, I didn't select the whole thing because the control shift down thing wasn't working. So if I just do control down to see what I have 2279. That's how many records I have. So I'll go back to my master and change this to age 2279. Just like that. Hit enter, and now I should get total results from both tabs, just filtered down to Illinois only. Just like that. In some cases, because you're adding more data, you may want to just remove your references to the row in both ranges, like this. And just for good practice, I'm gonna lock this one as well. 4. It doesn't really matter if you lock this, by the way, but I'll just do it. So now, in this particular case, this is completely fine because I'm filtering to just Illinois, so I'm good. But if I was not filtering to a particular column, it would do a lot of blanks, because if we have blanks here, like for example over here we have this blank, right? So that would come out in our results too as a blank. So if you want to see how to deal with those, I have a separate video to combine multiple tabs to a master tab, and you'll see how you can deal with that. But for this particular demonstration, that works just fine. So I went ahead and filtered it, I combine them together, and I get my results That's good enough. This works, and we get our master tab. So now what we're going to do, we're going to try to get the same sort of report, only we're going to basically get this information to a different tab. So I'm going to go to a different file or sheet, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to go to this different sheet, and I want to just grab the information from this sheet and bring it to this one. Now, for that, we will have to use a function called IMPORTRANGE. And to use function IMPORTRANGE, we need to get the ID of the sheet where the data is. So the data is on this tab. So the first thing I need to do, I will have to get the ID. So the ID lives right here on top. So you go here in your link, and you can see how after this, there is this D/, and then after that slash, that's your ID. So it's gonna go all the way until the next slash. So you just wanna go between those slashes. So I'm just gonna copy that because I'm gonna need that ID. So I'm gonna go back here, and the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start with my import range function. Just like that. So if I open this function, the first thing it's going to do, it's going to ask me for spreadsheet URL or spreadsheet ID. You can actually just copy the whole link to that spreadsheet, but it gets really long, so I prefer to do just the ID. So I'm going to do quote space quote, and that's the ID of my spreadsheet. So comma, and the second thing is the range, but the range should be as a string, meaning as text. So for now, I'm just gonna do double quotes and close this and hit enter. So you can see how I get NAs, it says internal error. So that's fine, we need to fix our range. So I'm gonna go back here and go to that master tab. So in this master tab, I have this, which is the range, right? So I'm just gonna copy this very carefully. See, I'm just grabbing right after the semicolon that's in my transactions tab, and then we have exclamation sign and the range. So I'm gonna just copy that. I'm gonna hit escape, go back, and here I'm going to update that. So this goes as text now, it goes in quotes in this import range function. I'm gonna hit enter. Now this function is gonna initially give me this reference error, and that's because we need to give access to that other file so it can grab the data. So I'm gonna click here, click allow access, and now it's grabbing the data from that tab from over here. That's from transactions tab. Now, this is great, but we also need the data from the second tab as well. Actually, let's do it separately. Let's just keep this data from one tab and run our query statement, and then we'll do the combination of two tabs together. So this is my data set. Now what I need to do, I need to run that query function and just get the state of Illinois out of this, right? So to do that, I'm going to go back to this formula. I'm going to simply just go back and cut this import range function, and I'm going to start with my query function, just like before. So my data is going to be that function I just had. So I'm going to paste it. And by the way, you don't want to just start typing with this query function and put import range in it right away. You want to make sure you first run import range function by itself at least once, because you need that allow access thing to pop out so you can give it access. And then you can do your formulas without really doing the second step. So anyway, so do this query function, the range is going to be that, and after this I'm going to do comma right here. So now we need that actual select statement. Now the thing with this import range is, again, because you're importing range from the other tab, it basically brings you back an array, which means, again, we cannot use A, B, C, D column names anymore. It's going to be just column 1, column 2, column 3 syntax. So we'll do select. I'm going to want all the columns, so I'll do my star. But if you wanted like the first and the third column, you would do col 1, comma, col 2, right? And again, uppercase C. And in this case, I want all columns, so I'll just do star. And I'm going to do where. And again, which column was it? I believe we said 8, right? Where column 8 equals, and it's going to be IL, Illinois. And then again, quote to finish this string over here. So that's going to be that. And again, comma, with number of headers, 1. Close this, hit enter, and here we go. Now we filtered that to just Illinois from this other file from transactions tab. Now the next step we're going to do, we're going to actually get this similar to this results over here. So we're going to combine this and this tab results together, and then we're going to go with our query function as a filter on top of that. So I'm going to go back here. Here I'm going to go back to my function. So what I have is this import range function from here through here. That gets me my data. And if you just paying attention here after comma, that's our statement. That's really going to be the same from here and on. What we need to do is just this range or the data, we need to modify it to have both. So right now, this is the first range. So if I just go back to my other formula, remember when we did this here, over here, the first range was this one. Now, because we're getting the data from the other tab, we have to do that import range function, but kind of logic is going to be the same. So what we need to do, we need to put this curly bracket again before that, and we have to do a semicolon, and then we have to do a second range after that. So let's go ahead and do that. So to do this, to make my life easier, I'm going to copy this range that's already in here that refers to the tab name and the range from the other tab I'm looking for. So copy, and I'm going to go back, open this, and right before import range, right there, I'm going to do a curly bracket. So I'm doing curly bracket there. And then after my import range function, I'm going to do that semicolon. Remember when I want to combine two ranges together as one. And here I need to do that second range, which is going to be whole other import range function right here in the middle. And then after that, we need to not forget to close it with this, which is going to close with this ending. So for right now, I'm just going to type my import range function. That would be probably cleaner and easier. There we are. That's my second import range function. We have to start with the URL, which is going to be the same file. If it was a different file, you would just put basically ID for that file. Right now, I'm going to need the ID for this, but I already copied the range. So for right now, I'm just going to do double quotes to leave it empty. I'm going to do comma, and I need the range. Again, this has to be a string. So quote, paste, quote. And that was the second range I copied from the other tab. At this point, what I have to do, I have to make sure that I provide this ID of my spreadsheet. So I'll go here, carefully just grab this ID, copy it because it's the same file. It's going to be the same. So paste that there. And the only thing I'm missing here, I'm missing a parenthesis because see, I've opened my import range function parentheses over here, and I provided the URL, then I provided the range, but I did not close the parentheses for that function. So now I have my import range function. One opens here and closes here. The second one opens here and closes over here. And all of that is combined in this array right here. That's my data range. And then we have to do select from this column and all that other stuff. So at this point, I'm just going to hit enter. Took a second for it to process it, but it's done now. So now we have our results, and this is combining both tabs from this other file together, and then we're filtering it down to Illinois. Now, instead of Illinois, if you wanted, let's say, California, you would do like CA, and that should now just filter to your California. So you can see how we get California cities in our results. And that's how you can pull data from the other tab, and sometimes from multiple tabs if necessary. And then if you need, just run your query function as you would. Just keep in mind that when you use import range, the data comes back as an array. What that means is that you have to use call 1, call 2, call 3, call 8, whatever. That's syntax. You cannot say A, B, C, D any longer. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, if you had more, you would just repeat this, another semicolon and another import range function all over again and repeat as many times as necessary. Keep in mind, you have to still stay in the boundaries of maximum sizes that Google Sheets allows you to do. Now, going back here, now the last thing I want to show you is how to run a subquery. So let's see what's a good example of that. So here I'm gonna go back. I guess I'll keep this, and here I'll do a report. So my report is going to be kind of like a pivot. So I want to just get my total sales by city, state, or something like that. I'll go back here and I'll start with my function. Again, I'm just going to use transactions, but same things applied. If you wanted to combine both of them together, you could with the same logic. So I'm going to go under transactions, and I'm going to go from this one, or you could just start from this corner, which is probably easier. Control Shift left and down, F4 to lock it, comma. Now we need to write our select statement. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a quick group by. So I'm going to say select. So what I want to do, I want to sum up is F our sales. No, it's cost of goods, E. So I'm going to sum E, and I'm going to group by G and H. And see how I'm not using column 1, column 2 anymore, because I'm referring directly to a range. So I do this, quotes to end it. I have one row on top and hit enter. Now that gives me this error, and the reason for that is because, first of all, I misspelled group by, so that gets me the numbers. But when we get the numbers, this is not very helpful because we can't see which city and which state this is. So for that, we're going to add the same columns to our select. So I'm going to do G, H, and sum of E, and group by G and H. So this gets me this, and this gives me a list of city states and our total sales for each. So now what I want to do, I just want to get the ones where the total sales amount is greater than $45,000. I don't want to look at the rest of the cities. I just want those that had more than $45,000 in sales. So to do this, I will have to run another query from this result. So I'm going to go back and copy this function without the equal sign. I'm going to hit escape. So technically you could just delete and start here, but because I want you to see what I'm doing, I'm just going to create my second one over here. So I'm going to do equals query function. So the data that I'm going to use is actually going to be this result. So I'm just going to paste that other function that gives me this result over here, and I'm going to do comma. And again, this results come back as an array, meaning once this result is back, see in this result I use like G and H with column names because it's directly referring to the tab, but this result itself is going to bring an array. So now in my second query, I'm going to have to start using that column index. So the query that I'm going to use is going to be select, and again I'll do all columns, and I'll filter by the column number 3, which is sum of sales. So I'll do call 3. That's what I'm filtering by. I will say that should be greater than 45,000. And close the quotes, comma. Now how many row labels I have? I have 1 on top. So 1 again, close parentheses. And at this point, hit enter. And that gives me just cities where the total sales is above $45,000. I really don't need this anymore, so I can just go ahead and delete that. And this will just work by itself. And that's a subquery example. So I'm just going to move this over here. And I'm going to delete this. And that's my result. That will be it for this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.